Hey everyone. We're starting a new chapter here. We finished Proverbs 16, so we're going to start Proverbs Chapter 16. And this is my favorite proverb. Just a whole lot of good wisdom and theology. There's actual doctrine in this chapter here, real good. Not that the other chapters don't have doctrine. It's just my focus is drawn to sovereignty in this chapter a lot. So, and that's probably like my favorite characteristic about God, and it's something that my heart's often drawn towards. So naturally I'm drawn towards this proverb. But without further ado, let's jump into it. The preparations of the heart in man, and the answer of the tongue is from the Lord. So, like right out the gate there, you see sovereignty even over the heart of man and over our speech. Like the Lord is directly in control of all things. Like the preparations of the heart, the planning, not the schemes. I don't know what the positive word of schemes would be. Schemes would be the negative. The motives, the desires, the inklings, all that is good comes from God. Every good thought, every good deed, it's because He's the Father of lights. He is the source of goodness. Where can you get, if He is the totality of goodness, if He is goodness, He is love, He is the source, where else could goodness come from? There is no inherent goodness that dwells within us that springs from us. All goodness comes from the Father of lights, comes down from God, and is worked out in us. So every good thought that you have, every good motive, every good desire in its pure form comes from God. Everything evil comes from us, which is, there's a sovereign hand of wisdom over that as well. Then you get into like His permissive will versus His active will. He is actively producing good and permissively allowing evil to fulfill His good and wise and holy purposes. And so the good analogy there is, what is darkness? Darkness in itself is not a thing. It's the absence of light. If you remove light, you're naturally left with dark. If you remove heat, you're naturally left with cold. So if you remove good, if you remove God, what's naturally left is evil and wickedness. So when we fell in the garden, we were removed from the presence of God, and so all that's left is evil. Everything that can come from us is wickedness. So there's a sovereign hand over that as well, and that God actively intervenes to produce good and permissively withholds in order to fulfill His wise and holy purposes, which includes even the evil acts of men. So in here, when it's saying the preparations of the heart and the answer of the tongue is from the Lord, it's naturally talking about the good, because in God there is no evil, there is no wickedness. So everything good is coming from Him. Verse number 2, all the ways of a man are clean in his own eyes, but the Lord weigheth the spirits. And that's how men always say, like almost every man proclaims his own goodness. It says, I think in Ecclesiastes, or maybe it says here in Proverbs, I'm not sure, but one of the two, I believe. And this verse is saying the same thing. All the ways of man are clean in his own eyes. The human heart has a way of justifying itself, considering all its actions good, so that everything you do, you're justified in your own sight. With a rare exception, where you know you did something wrong and then there's guilt. But in the most part, even like what people would call little white lies, or just take something as simple as speeding. We justify in our heart saying, I was running late, I needed to do it, everybody else is doing it. You don't see yourself as a vile lawbreaker. You justify yourself. So man's ways are pure in his own eyes. It says all the ways of man are clean in his own eyes. He sees, because he justifies, he sees his end goal, and therefore he justifies his actions, saying, well, I had a quota to work, to fulfill at work, So I cheated and worked angles and did things to get it done. But I was justified in it because I had to get. So that's just another example. The point is man has this end goal in mind, and so he justifies his actions, so that everything he does he thinks is clean and pure in his own eyes. He thinks, well, it ain't really hurting anybody, ain't really doing any bad. And so that's how men view their hearts, and that's why like almost every man proclaims his own goodness. Every man thinks that he is going to get to heaven on Judgment Day because he looks at himself and he says, well, everything I did had a reason. For the most part, I'm pretty good. I was justified in all my actions, failing to see that breaking the law is breaking the law. The ends don't justify the means. And that's where it says, the Lord weigheth the spirits. He's looking at desires, motives, and your desires are always simplicity or selfishness or ease or necessity, which is driven by greed or pride or fear. There's something underlying the desires that cause you to act in certain ways that you then justify. The Lord's looking at those motives, and they're impure motives, because again, all good comes from him. All we have without him is impure motives, because we're fallen. We're always going to act selfishly. Verse 3, commit thy works unto the Lord, and thy thoughts shall be established. This has been a key verse in my life, especially over the last few years, just because I recognize that the battle of sin is battled in the mind. That is where sin starts. It starts with a lust. It starts with an impure desire. It starts with some sort of thought that we then latch onto and fantasize about. We play it out in our minds to its fulfillment, whatever it is. If it's greed or anger or sexual desire, whatever it is, we fantasize and play that out to the end. And then the scriptures say that those thoughts then give birth to sin, and its end result is death. So it starts in the mind, and I've always thought, like, how do you control your mind? Because thoughts just come in, they bombard you. We can't blame external sources, but this world is full of external sources that are wicked, that draw our attention to sins. But then, so the allurement, but even without that, even if you're living in a cave with no external sources, your own heart is impure and is going to conjure up imaginations. And so, like, as a Christian, you try to battle that. You recognize when a sinful thought comes in, you go, oh man, that's a sinful thought. I should not be thinking that. And you try to fight it. And even when you get a victory over that thought, it's relentless. It's like the devil shooting arrows at you. Although I'm not going to blame the devil, because this is the impurity of the heart as well. But it's those thoughts continually come back. Like you can put it to death for a second. You can distract your mind and say, no, I'm not going to think those thoughts. Let me think of something else. And as soon as you lose attention for a second, or whatever you would call it, vigor or resolve, as soon as you get distracted for a second, that thought creeps in from another angle, and all of a sudden it's back, and you're thinking about it again, and you're going, whoa, no, I'm not going to think about that. And you put it down, and then it comes again. And so it's relentless. These evil thoughts are relentless. And so I've always thought, like, my hope has always been in this verse, because it says, commit thy works unto the Lord, and thy thoughts shall be established. So the works precede the thoughts. And so, like, the idea is, if I can keep busy with the things of the Lord, if I can commit my works to the Lord, because it's in that idle time that these thoughts come. It's when you're sitting with nothing to do, when you're bored, when you're distracted, whatever it is, those thoughts come. But if you can commit your works to the Lord, if you can diligently set yourself to say, I'm going to do spiritual things, I'm going to fill my time with spiritual things, it says then your thoughts will be established. Then you're going to think pure thoughts. Which is, you would think it would be different. You would think it would be reverse. You would think establish your thoughts and then the works will follow, because that's how sanctification works, from the inside out. But this is saying do the outside, and then the inside will think correctly. It's like, focus on spiritual things, like doing this, like I'm not thinking sinful things when I'm doing something like this, or when I'm reading the scriptures, or when I'm studying something out, or when I'm writing an article, or when you're doing something spiritual, when you're making a Facebook post. That's Facebook can be a blessing in that way. When you're using social media to think about the things of the Lord and to proclaim the things of the Lord, your thoughts aren't dwelling on sin at that moment. You're committing your works to the Lord, and your thoughts are thereby established. So the hard part is, it's like, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but it tends to be like, maybe it's a laziness, like a spiritual laziness, the thought of constantly doing something spiritual, not having any time to just sit back and relax and not doing anything. It's like, I've always thought, like, we have to be wholehearted Christians, and then I get disappointed in myself, because I'm like, what if I'm devoting 75% of my time to the Lord, and then 25% of the time I'm just turning my brain off and watching TV? It's like, that's not how it's supposed to be. We're supposed to be all in. We're supposed to be 100% dedicated to the Lord, but it's just this never-ending, relentless battle, and the thoughts prove that, because, like I said, as soon as you let your guard down, evil thoughts start creeping back in. So we have to find a way, and that's only going to come through this power of the Spirit, but we have to at least be aware of it, and acknowledge that we have to have 100% of our lives dedicated to the Lord. And that's that verse that says, if you walk in the Spirit, you will not fulfill the desires of the flesh. So it's walking in the Spirit. It's the times where we stop walking in the Spirit that then we give into these fleshly desires. But anyways, that's verse 3. Lord willing, we'll pick up in verse 4 next time. All right, I love you guys. Talk to you later. Hey everybody. We're continuing on in Proverbs chapter 16. We read through verse 3. So we're going to pick up here in verse 4. The Lord hath made all things for himself, yea, even the wicked for the day of evil. So there's a verse that's very strong on the sovereignty of the Lord. It's a verse that I think would probably be picked up and used as a defense of the gospel, or the doctrines of grace. It's a verse that I certainly would focus in on to defend the sovereignty of God. Unfortunately, I think it's probably a verse that a lot of people struggle with too. A lot of people find offense in, because it says that the Lord has created even the wicked. The wicked have been created by the Lord for a specific purpose, for the day of evil. Now, taken in totality with the rest of scriptures, we know that means that his wrath and his justice and his vengeance and his power and his strength and his righteousness are going to be shown on these vessels of wrath, like Romans calls them. They've been created for that purpose, to reveal the power of God, the same way Pharaoh, it says, was created for that purpose as well. So this says the Lord has made all things, everything. Every single thing that exists because of God. Colossians says there is nothing made that he didn't make. He made all things. And so that includes the wicked, the reprobate, those who have been passed over and left in their sins. He's created them for a purpose. In the same way that he created Jacob, he created Esau. Even though Esau was created in rebellion, through the rebellion of his father, and in sin and wickedness, there was a purpose and a plan behind Esau. Esau exists for a reason. There's a purpose. There's an all-wise purpose behind it. In the same way that the fall in the garden happened, there was a reason God put that tree there. There's a reason the fall happened, because the entirety of history is about Jesus Christ. And in order for him to be revealed as Savior, there had to be a fall. There had to be redemption. So there's an all-wise purpose that we don't want to go too far on. There's a tendency to try to offer conjecture and logical inference, but you can go beyond the scriptures. We don't want to do that, because God is not the author of sin, and God does not take pleasure in the death of the wicked, and God can't even look upon evil. But we have to reconcile that idea with the idea that evil exists, that evil men exist, that God has chosen some to salvation and chosen to pass over some. And all these things exist within his wise, all-encompassing counsel, that all things are made by him, even the wicked, for the day of evil. There's a purpose for the wicked. There's a purpose in that. There's a wise and holy purpose. And this verse touches on that. They're made for the day of evil, the day of judgment. Verse 5, everyone that is proud in heart is an abomination to the Lord. Though hand join in hand, he shall not be unpunished. So the first half of that's pretty self-explanatory. The Lord hates pride. That's emphasized over and over and over throughout the Proverbs. That it's one of the 7 things listed as the sins that the Lord hates. It's an abomination in his sight. We know that destruction comes after pride, that a fall occurs because of pride, that pride was the sin of Satan. We know that pride is just if there is such a thing, it's one of the foundational sins. It's one of the wickednesses that exist in man that is preeminent, that's dominant. It's a wickedness. And it says that everyone who's proud in heart, that's in your motives, in your desires, when you do something and there's an inner thought, even if not recognized, if there's an inner motive or an inner foundation of pride, of I'm better than so and so in any way, I'm better looking, I'm smarter, I'm stronger, I'm more humble, I'm more religious and pious, any of that, my country is better, that national pride. We talk about certain kinds of pride as if they're good things, but pride is a boasting over others, and that's not a good thing. Pride is an abomination to the Lord. The second half of that verse, there's there's at least 2 different opinions on that, so I'm not really sure where it says hand in hand. Though hand in hand join, he shall not be unpunished. Not really sure what that means. There's an idea of, well, like one opinion I've heard is though the wicked join together, take each other's hands, though they form a coalition, a conspiracy against the Lord, even if they have numbers, they won't be unpunished. And then the thing that I've often thought is though hand join in hand, like begging, like pleading, the wicked at the end, at judgment, when they finally do seek repentance after death, when they see the Lord coming, that the scriptures say it's too late then. Though hand join in hand, they will not be unpunished. So I'm not sure which is, the first one's probably more likely, but I'm not sure. Either way, the overall theme there is that justice will be served, that the wicked will not escape, that wickedness will be accounted for, there will be payment. Verse 6, by mercy and truth iniquity is purged, and by the fear of the Lord men depart from evil. So this is another verse that's been really foundational in my walk. It's been something that I've relied on, something that I've counted on, a verse that I've hoped in, because in my walk, the most dominant theme in my walk with the Lord is self-examination. Like I'm persistently and constantly aware of my own sinful thoughts, my own sinful desires, my own sinful motives. I'm constantly aware of the wickedness that exists in my heart. And so I'm always struggling against that, always in sadness that it exists, and in hope that the Lord will deliver me from it. And so that's constant. That's a nonstop battle. And one of the verses that I rely on is this verse 6, because it says that, I look at it backwards, so the last half of it first. By the fear of the Lord men depart from evil. By a reverent fear, by an awe, like a child with a parent. If you're afraid your parent is going to discipline you, you don't do the action. It prevents you from doing what you think, what you desire to do, what you want to do, but it's wrong. You know it's wrong, and you know you're going to get punished. And if you fear and reverence your parents enough, and reverence that punishment enough, reverence justice and wrath enough, the justice and wrath of your parents, you won't do that thing. And so it is spiritually. When we fear the Lord, and only the born again will know this, that there are times when you're in a wickedness, when you're in a sin, when you're doing a sin. And I don't like to use the phrase when you've fallen into sin, because that implies that it's some sort of accidental thing. No, we knowingly, willingly walk into sin. We choose to do our sins. You didn't fall into it. You did it. You walked in that direction. And when we do, sometimes the Lord, which is a sign of his mercy, there's a verse that says he chastises those he loves. But there's times where you will feel the hot displeasure of the Lord. You will feel the discomforting sense of wrath and judgment, where it feels like you're being weighted down, where you're afraid to look up, where you're afraid that I'm going to be killed. This sin, the Lord is going to snuff out my life because of this. I have rebelled and I deserve death, and judgment and wrath is coming. And that causes you to depart from that sin. When you fear the Lord, when you fear his consequences, when you fear the consequences of that sin, the natural ebb and flow of action and consequences, when you know that action is going to bring about the consequences, when you fear that, it causes you to depart from that sin. I've experienced it in my life. There are certain sins I've had victory over that have come through this fear of the Lord, the fear of the justice, the fear of the fruit of that sin, the rotten fruit that comes from that sin, that the consequences of doing that sin. I've been fearful of it, and fearful of the Lord's hand and his wrath and his anger at that sin. And so it's caused me to leave that sin behind. And in the sins that I still struggle with, my prayer is often, Lord, grant me that fear. Cause me to fear before you, so that I fear you enough that I won't do this, that I fear the consequences, that I have that respect, that honor, that awe, that reverence, that'll turn me away from the sin that has snared me, that has a hold, that the lust and the addiction has grabbed a hold of me, and the only thing that'll break it is the fear of you. And then the first half of it is a truth that I desperately want in my heart, but it still hasn't been activated yet. It says, by mercy and truth iniquity is purged. So purging is better than turning. The fear will turn you away from the sin, but to have the sin purged is to have it burned away, to have it removed. So I might desire a particular sin in my heart. I might desire to do this thing, and because I fear, I don't do it, but the desire remains. And that's a struggle, because when you're self-examining all the time, you see that it remains there. You're like, yeah, I'm not doing that, but I know I'm thinking it. I know that desire's in my heart, and that's got to go. It's because that's just as wicked. Jesus said to think with lust is the same as adultery. To hate in your heart is the same as murder. The thoughts, the desires, the motives are the foundation of sin. They're the root of sin, and so they've got to be removed. And so this says that mercy and truth will purge those, will remove those, will burn them from your heart. And I haven't yet experientially come to know that. To know, how does mercy and truth expunge that sin from my heart? How does his mercy and truth? Because right now the fear turns me from it, but I need the mercy and truth to get rid of it. And so that's a part that I still long for, that I'm still pining for. It's a truth that I desire to know more fully through experience, because I'm not satisfied not doing my sins. I'm not satisfied until the sin is removed, until the root, until the thought of the sin doesn't occur to me anymore. And so my great hope is in this verse. This is one of the verses where I this might be the foundational verse to give me hope against my sins, is the 16:6 here. So anyways, we'll stop there, and Lord willing, we'll pick up in verse 7 next time. All right, I love you guys. Talk to you later. Hey everyone. We're continuing on in Proverbs Chapter 16. We read through verse 6, so we're going to pick up here in verse 7. It says, when a man's ways please the Lord, he maketh even his enemies to be at peace with him. And that's just the favor of the Lord. The Lord fights our battles. and goes before us and makes our way prosperous, not financially or health, but just in he brings peace and contentment wherever we go. And that's not to say we're not going to have enemies and affliction and trials and tribulations, but there's just an all-encompassing sense of favor, that the Lord works in our favor. He fights our battles. He clears our paths. He makes our way straight. And so the born again, the Christian who's trusting in the Lord, can rest secure, even in the midst of a storm. There's no need to panic. There's no need to worry. The Lord will make our way straight. Verse 8, better is a little with righteousness than great revenues without right. A man's heart deviseth his way, but the Lord directeth his steps. So there's another verse. I mentioned when we first started this proverb how much I enjoy it, just because of its focus on sovereignty and God's power over all things, and how that's my favorite aspect of God. It's the characteristic of God that brings me the most peace, the most joy and satisfaction and contentment, knowing that He's in control of all things. And we previously read that the answer of the tongue is from the Lord. And here we read that our steps are directed by the Lord. Our hearts plan our way. We plan and we plot. And it seems like a lot of our mental energy, at least I assume this is the same for everybody. It's the way I am. A lot of the mental energy we expend is spent thinking about the future, like plotting what ifs, like what am I going to do if this happens? How am I going to do this? A lot of the day is spent organizing what ifs and our steps, thinking ahead. But the reality is that's foolish, because we don't know what's going to happen in the next moment. Our future is a fluid state from our perspective, and it's very rarely goes according to what we had planned in our hearts. The counsel of the Lord stands. What He has decided for us is what's worked out. He directs our steps. Everything that occurs is planned and designed by Him. And so that's why we pray. The prayer is supposed to be not my will, but your will. We're supposed to be submissive to His will, to submit ourselves into His hand, to basically go with the flow of life instead of trying to swim against the current and make our own way. Just let the river carry us wherever. Isaiah talks about how we're like eagles that float on the wind. And eagles will just lock their wings in place and just float on the current. They let the current take them. And that's how we're supposed to be, to just allow the Lord. He's going to do whatever He's going to do. And that's why that prayer also says, your will on earth as it is in heaven. In heaven, His will is done without resistance, without frustration, without bitterness. It's just done with joy. But on earth we kick and we struggle and we try to go our own way, but His will is still going to be accomplished, but it's not being done like it is in heaven. It's being done as we resist and we fight and we struggle and we get discontent. So as we submit ourselves to the will of the Lord and just trust His direction and go with His flow, we learn to be content. We learn to be at peace. He directs our steps. Verse 10. A divine sentence is in the lips of the king. His mouth transgresseth not in judgment. A just weight and balance are the Lord's. All the weights of the bag are His work. It is an abomination to kings to commit wickedness, for the throne is established by righteousness. Righteous lips are the delight of kings, and they love him that speaketh right. The wrath of a king is as messengers of death, but a wise man will pacify it. So that applies not just on a national level, not just like a national king, but all authorities. When you're under the authority of somebody, their wrath against you is like a messenger of death. When they have power over you, their wrath directed towards you is a terrible thing. So wisdom pacifies. Wisdom seeks to make peace with those in authority, to keep peace, to keep favor, knowing that they have some sort of control. So that would go for parental guidance. We're commanded to honor our parents, to be obedient. That would apply to employment status. You don't want your boss to be angry at you. You do what is necessary to pacify his anger, to make him pleased with you. It applies to government. It applies everywhere there's authority. It is wise to be under passive submission to authorities, and to seek to please them, to seek to earn their favor, to pacify their wrath. Verse 15, in the light of the king's countenance is life, and his favor is as a cloud of the latter rain. How much better is it to get wisdom than gold, and to get understanding rather to be chosen than silver. So that's another key verse. We've mentioned several verses in the first part of this proverb that really stick out to me, that have kind of been life verses, so to speak, verses that I constantly come back to. And this is one of them. This is something that was instilled in me early on in my salvation. The fact that wisdom and understanding are more valuable than treasures, more valuable than money, more valuable than gold and silver. To have wisdom, to have understanding, to know the ways of the Lord, to know how to please God, how to be in his favor, how to walk in wisdom, how to walk in righteousness, how to do what is correct. That is infinitely more valuable than all the gold in the world. What does it matter if we have everything that this world can offer, but we have the anger of the Almighty God, the Almighty King? It is far more valuable to have to have him be pleased with you, to have his favor upon you, than anything else. And that's why his word is so important, because that is where his wisdom is found. That is where his knowledge is distributed to us through the word of God. And so this is a treasure. This is a treasure trove. It's a field of gold where every single line contains spiritual riches. And so we spend our time digging and searching. This is way more valuable than anything else. And so that verse is crucial to understand, to realize I need the wisdom of God. I need to know what he would have for me. I need my prayer when I first got saved was always, Lord, grant me wisdom, understanding, knowledge, and oh no, I can't remember. That's a shame, because I used to pray that every single day, especially as I would go into the Word, because like when you're first starting out with the Word, it's really hard to comprehend. But I knew here's the treasure chest, and I need what's inside. And so knowledge, wisdom, understanding, and why am I missing that last one? Oh man. Discernment and discernment. So that would be my prayer every time I would pray, every time I would read the word. Lord, give me knowledge, give me wisdom, give me understanding, give me discernment. And so I would encourage everybody out there to make that your prayer. There is nothing more valuable than godly wisdom, than biblical knowledge, spiritual understanding, spiritual discernment. Those are the most valuable and precious things you could possess. So that was verse 16, and with that, we'll stop. Lord willing, we'll pick up in verse 17 next time. All right, I love you guys. Talk to you later. Hey, everyone. We're continuing on in Proverbs Chapter 16. We read through verse 16, so we're going to pick up here in verse 17. It says, "The highway of the upright is to depart from evil. He that keepeth his way preserveth his soul. Pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall." That pride before destruction That's a common verse. I'm sure everybody's familiar with it. It might even made its way into the secular world. I'm not sure if that's a common saying in the world or if it's just amongst Christians, but there's some things in the Bible that make their way into the common vernacular, like skin of the teeth, escape by the skin of your teeth. That's in Job. And, you know, do unto others, you know, as you would have them do unto you, things like that. There's common sayings that people are familiar with. I think this is one of them. But it's interesting that pride precedes destruction. Like pride, we've talked about this before, how it seems to be like one of those foundational sins, one of those root sins. And I'm very, very aware of it in my own heart. As a matter of fact, like when I do a video or something like that, I often have to pray that the Lord would protect me from pride, because I'm often looking for the approval of others to boost my pride. And so, like, even when I'm doing these videos, I have to hide the comments because my ego will focus on that and get distracted. But pride is just this fundamental thing that's lurking within our hearts. It's the sin that caused Satan to fall. It's the like I say, it's one of those foundational sins. It seems to just be ingrained in our nature, part of our heart. And when we act in pride, we are sure to bring destruction. And I don't think the lost world makes the connection. I know I do. I see it, like, even in silly things, like if in like competitive games with like my friends. I mentioned to my friends one time, because sometimes if we can't decide on something, we'll cast lots, so to speak. We'll do like rock, paper, scissors to make a decision. And I mentioned to them, you know, I don't want to do paper, rock, scissors because I always lose. And it's because even in something silly like that, a silly competitive game, there's pride that flares up in me. And the Lord seems to humble me by causing me to lose frequently in competitive things. And this verse isn't necessarily, well, it is talking about that, but it's more severe than the competitive games. It's talking about, like, it uses the word destruction. So when there's ego involved, when there's arrogance, when there's pride, you can rest assured that destruction is sure to follow. There's going to be some sort of catastrophe that brings people back to their senses, that humbles people back to the position they're supposed to be in. Verse 19. Better it is to be of a humble spirit with the lowly than to divide the spoil with the proud. That humility, that's a key Christian characteristic, which is the opposite of pride, is humility. That's something we are to be seeking after, to have this lowly view of self, to have a submissive, lesser view, where like other people get the preeminence, where you're looking to seek the benefit of others, where you're looking to promote others, not self. And like that actually will lead to, I think that humility will lead to like a selfless kind of love. Because another thing I was just talking about with my friends is the lack of love that we have. Like if somebody irritates you, or somebody has a personality quirk, or you know, somebody that's just hard to like, we tend to hold them at arm's distance. We don't embrace them as we ought to, and I'm talking about like within the Christian community, and that's to our own shame. It's because we have this selfishness where we're desiring our comfort more than others, whereas so it's not necessarily the exact same thing. I think the humility will spring into the love. The humility is to see others, to want their benefit more. The love is to set aside what I want, what my comforts are, what I desire, and to seek your comfort, your desire, your happiness. And so that goes hand in hand, because in that humble position, it seems to breed the love that's going to look out for others instead of self. Verse 20, he that handleth a matter wisely shall find good, and whoso trusteth in the Lord, happy is he. Excuse me. The wise in heart shall be called prudent, and the sweetness of the lips increaseth learning. Understanding is a wellspring of life unto him that hath it, but the instruction of fools is folly. The heart of the wise teacheth his mouth, and addeth learning to his lips. Pleasant words are as a honeycomb, sweet to the soul, and health to the bones. That's another thing I think we've talked about before, another idea that we've seen in the Proverbs here, about we have the ability with our words to either build people up or to tear them down emotionally, psychologically. We don't have the charismatic ability, like some people talk about, to speak things into existence or to speak blessings over people and that kind of nonsense. But we do have the ability to speak kind, gentle, affirming words, to esteem each other more highly, to edify one another, to build each other up, instead of tearing down with like critical, harsh, berating words. We have the ability to do both. And here it's saying that pleasant words, a good word, to speak kindly of another, to praise another, to heap, those, when you see something good in somebody, to recognize it, to acknowledge it, to tell them, well done, or doesn't matter. That's what God says to us on the last days, well done. We're going to get those pleasant words, and think about how good that's going to feel to hear that the Lord is pleased with us. Those pleasant words spoken to us, like refreshing honey to the soul, sweet to the soul. It says health to the bones. And so we have that ability with each other as well, to speak those affirming words, to praise your friends. Often with those that you're really close with, you can get into the kind of a jesting, backbiting, critical, sarcastic tone, which can be fine and playful in some circumstances, but you also want to make sure that you're recognizing the good and helping to build each other up, telling each other, hey, you did really well here, or you look really nice today, or that was a good thing you did there, or whatever it is, and however you can offer some sort of praise, but to recognize each other's praiseworthy things, recognize it, because then their job is going to then to be to reflect that back to God, to recognize this is a gift from God. So we just want to be careful to not always be critical of each other, but to speak those affirming words to each other, to let each other know, I care about you and I recognize these good things in you. Jesus did that in the book of Revelation. Even when he was going to bring a critical word, he started with praise. He started by recognizing the good in them, and then bringing the edifying correction. So we want to be careful to do that as well. But anyways, that was verse 24. I think we'll stop there, and Lord willing, we'll pick up in verse 25 next time. All right, I love you guys. Talk to you later. Hey everyone. We're continuing on in Proverbs Chapter 16. We read through verse 24, so we're going to pick up in verse 25. It says, "There is a way that seemeth right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death." It's a very commonly quoted verse. I don't know if I've ever there's like a surface level definition of what that means. And like a lot of people just apply it in a general sense, that like most people think what they're doing is right, like following their own heart or following their own desires or whatever. But outside of the way of Christ is death. People who follow for instance, when people say they're just following their heart, well, the scriptures teach us that the heart is deceitfully wicked. And like so the lost, unregenerate man has evil, wicked desires, and so we shelter that, we shield ourselves from that by justifying ourselves, by comparing ourselves to other people, thinking we're not that bad, or thinking that what we're doing is for a good purpose, that the ends justify the means, and so on and so forth. But outside of Christ, and he's called the way, so there's only one way. There's many paths you can go down in this life. There's many things you can do. There's many directions you can go, but they all lead to death outside of Christ. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no man comes to the Father but through me. So it's only in submission to Jesus Christ, in obedience to Jesus Christ, in faith in Jesus Christ, walking in humble submission to his lordship, to his kingship, and allowing his word to transform your heart, and to be conformed to his image, to be conformed to his word. That is the path of life. All other paths, no matter how good they may seem. A lot of people set their hearts on seemingly benevolent activities. They seek social justice reforms or charitable causes, and so they think they're a good person walking in a good way, and that like the common belief is that when judgment comes, when they die and they stand before the pearly gates, their good deeds are going to outweigh their bad, and they're going to get in. But what they fail to do is to examine the motives and desires. Even behind charitable deeds, there's selfishness. It's to make yourself feel good, or to ease conscience, to convince yourself that you're a good person. There's some sort of impure, selfish motive behind it. It's not done for God's glory, and therefore it's sin. So those are the ways that seem right unto a man. You think about like the Shriners. People will say, oh, the Shriners can't be bad guys. They have the children's hospital. They help, children burn victims and stuff like that. But the reality is that's just a show. That's a mirage. The Shriners are a Luciferic organization. I kind of went off on a tangent there. That's a different direction than my original thought. But there's a way that seems right. There's a path that seems right. You think you're doing good. You think you're walking in an ethical, moral way. But you're failing to realize the selfish motives behind it are sin. And there's only one way that leads to heaven, and that's Jesus Christ. Verse 26, he that laboreth for himself, for his mouth craveth it of him. That's just, people are going to diligently work because of some sort of self-desire, some sort, you need something, so you strive for it. And then verse 27 here, an ungodly man diggeth up evil, and in his lips there is as a burning fire. Yeah, that's an unfortunate thing that exists even in the saints. We speak ill of each other, talking about the lips being a burning fire. We destroy each other with our words. We're constantly critical, nitpicking at each other. And this goes further than an ungodly man diggeth up evil, like searches to find some sort of accusation against another. And you see that so prevalent in like lost society. Think back to when you were lost, how quickly you were to speak ill of somebody else. Like it's almost like a pleasure to find something bad about somebody else that you can point at, because it then makes you feel better. It justifies yourself. It puts you into a position of superiority. You feel like you're somehow better than that person because of this evil that you found him. Even if it's an evil you do, somebody would, be like, oh, did you hear, so-and-so cheated on his wife? And in their heart, they're adulterous. They would do the same thing in the same position, but they like digging up that evil to bring accusation against others. And that's because every man proclaims his own goodness. Everybody uses other people as the standard to define goodness. So if they can put others down, then they elevate themselves, morally speaking. And so they're able to justify and see themselves in a better light. I'm better than so-and-so. I'm better than this. I'm better than that. So it's just an evil heart. Verse 28, a froward man soweth strife, and a whisperer separateth chief friends. And that just ties in with that. Not only do they dig up evil on each other, but they also cause division and cause fights. It soweth strife. That's intentionally looking for fights, intentionally looking for arguments, looking for conflict. Whispering in somebody's ear, hey, so and so said this about you. Just to get that conflict going. Verse 29, a violent man enticeth his neighbor, and leadeth him into the way that is not good. So again, these last three verses, man, we're really getting an in-depth look at the heart of the evil person. Enticeth their neighbor. We've read about how alluring sin is, how subtle and seductive it is. And so a person, a violent man in this case, a person with that wickedness in their heart, enticeth their neighbor to do evil. Think back to, again, when you were lost, how many times your friends persuaded you to do something, to do something that was wrong. It's just the heart and nature of an unregenerate person to act like this. Verse 30 ties in with that. He says, he shutteth his eyes to devise froward things. Moving his lips, he bringeth evil to pass. So I think shutteth his eyes, I don't know if that's about like thinking, because it says he shutteth his eyes to devise. That's to like create, to froward things, perverse, evil things. Like a person closes their eyes and thinks like, how can I get this evil? And then the lips bringeth evil to pass, like talking, like, I mean, that's how I was when I was lost. And so it's just the unregenerate state of man. But that was verse 30. I think we'll stop there. Lord willing, we'll pick up in verse 31 next time. All right. I love you guys. Talk to you later. Hey, everyone. We're continuing on in Proverbs Chapter 16. We read through verse 30. So we'll pick up here in verse 31. The hoary head is a crown of glory, if it be found in the way of righteousness. So I'm not exactly sure what the word hoary means. It has something to do with being old. I don't know if it means gray, or if like how hair gets kind of coarse as you get older. But either way, what it's saying there is that it is the evidence of that age. As you age, your hair changes. And so that's an evidence that it's a crown of glory. There's wisdom and dignity in old age. There's honor in it, especially amongst the born again. Like we honor all of our elders. We want to be respectful and kind to everybody who's older than us, but especially those of the faith, and those in maturity in the faith, who have advanced years as born again Christians. Because they're going to have more wisdom. They've spent more time in the Word. They've endured longer. They've ran this race longer. There's more to be gleaned from them. And often the spiritual maturity in them causes them to be slow to speak. And so when they do speak, there's deep wisdom there. There's godly counsel in their words. And so the words of our elderly saints is to be cherished. And like I say, especially those who have been born again for a long period of time, who have just walked in the faith. A person who's been in the faith for 40 years is going to know more than a person who's been born again for 5 years. They're going to have more wisdom. They're going to have more life experience. And in those life experiences, they're going to have been taught by the Spirit how to handle and how to adapt and how to overcome those life experiences. And so, this is just saying to basically to respect your elders, that there's going to be the evidence of age is an evidence of wisdom, if it be found in the way of righteousness, it says there. And so again, that's with the born again, those who are in Christ. Those who are lost, although we offer respect and honor to the elderly, and dignity and care when needed, if you're not born again, you're not going to have any wisdom to offer. Worldly wisdom is not going to help a Christian. A Christian has no business taking advice or counsel from somebody who's not born again. They don't. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Like, so if they've rejected that, they don't even have the beginnings of wisdom. There is nothing to offer in the realm of actual wisdom, of actual spiritual, righteous, good, holy wisdom. But take care to really pay attention to the elderly saints and what they have to say. Cherish them. Go out of your way to seek counsel from them. Like, I think I've had a couple of brothers and sisters get married here recently, and very young, and like, to me, I'm sitting there thinking, like, if I was getting married, one of the most important things I would do is find elderly saints who have been married for a long time, to glean wisdom and counsel from them, to hear from them, the wisdom they have to offer on the different challenges that are going to come through marriage, the different ways to overcome. And it ought to be that way with all things. Whenever you're facing any sort of dilemma or scenario where you need counsel, if you can get an elderly saint to offer you wisdom, it's to be cherished. That's a great thing. Verse 32, he that is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he that ruleth his spirit than he that taketh a city. So that's just saying there's something about temperance. To be temperate and self-controlled is a good thing. There's something in that. Something that I'm still striving to grow into. I have an angry disposition. I'm prone to what I call righteous anger, get angry at unjust, wicked things. But anger is a dangerous thing. It can smother love. It can quench compassion. And so to be slow to anger is better than being mighty, and having that control, that temperance of the spirit is better than being able to conquer a city. And then verse 33, the lot is cast into the lap, but the whole disposing thereof is of the Lord. Another great verse on sovereignty. A lot was kind of like an olden day way of like rolling dice, or like rock, paper, scissors, to determine a winner. It was an old way of determining, like the disciples when they lost Judas Iscariot and they needed a new disciple, and they couldn't decide between two, they cast lots to see which one would be with them. And so it's like rolling of the dice. And it's saying that the sovereignty of God is even over something as small and trivial as that. It says the whole disposing thereof is of the Lord, which is why the disciples cast lots to find out who the replacement for Judas would be, because they knew that God was sovereign over that, and that God would use that means to reveal his purpose. God is sovereign over every single action in this universe. No matter how small or trivial, he has a design, he has a purpose, he has a counsel in it. Nothing occurs that wasn't meant to occur, that isn't designed according to his holy, wise counsel, his holy, wise purposes. I've heard, I think Pastor John Piper say that in the entire universe, there's not one single solitary speck of space dust that departs from the will of God. It travels on the very path it was designed to travel on. It does the exact thing it was designed to do. And so every time you roll a dice, it rolls and lands on the number it was designed and purposed to land on. And so the casting of the lots is designed by God. And I know you might think it's superstitious, but it's not. Me and my buddies, when we can't decide on something, we'll rock, paper, scissors for it, trusting that the Lord is sovereign and that whatever he wants is going to occur. And our hearts are right in that, because we're not looking to it as a superstitious thing, where like fate or some, nonsensical universal law is going to determine what we're doing. We know that God is sovereign and that he is determined. He has determined the outcome of that game of chance, and so we can trust the results to it. And there's another verse that talks about how like it ends disputes, the casting of lots. And it's weird how that works. Like you can have like a fervent disagreement about something, like something simple. Often with us, it's, where do you want to eat? And like, let's say, you're just disputing over that. You cast lots for it, and whichever way it goes, it seems to just end the argument. It's like, okay, that's the way it's supposed to be. So it's just a beautiful verse on the sovereignty of God, showing His hand behind everything. And with that wraps up chapter 16. And so, Lord willing, we'll start chapter 17 next time. All right, I love you guys. Talk to you later.